welcome to the Understanding Projects podcast. This is Dave Barrett. My discussion today is with Hayley Press. Hayley has extensive experience in the field of public relations, including event management, partner relationships, fundraising, community engagement, and volunteer coordination. She is also a graduate of Conestoga's Public Relations program. Our discussion centers on a specific type of project, events and event management. We talk about a number of aspects of events, including how they differ from a typical project, the characteristics of successful event managers, virtual events, and managing event teams. Here is my discussion with Hayley Press.
Thank you for having me. It's a little strange to be on this end. I'm nervous, but it's going to be good.
Yes, this is actually a big, a couple of firsts that we have in this episode is one is that you are the first PR grad to be on the program, so that's really good.
Represent.
And, yes, exactly. And you are the first fellow podcaster that I've talked to that I know of. I've
Nice.
maybe some of the others had ones that I didn't know of, but you are the host of The Reveler, which is a podcast that you've been doing. So I encourage anyone to search you on their favorite podcast catcher and check out your stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So like you say, it's the first time on that side of the mic. So anyways, our talk today is sort of centered around kind of a special type of project. I mean, the theme of this series of my podcast in general is project management, projects, understanding projects in the real world. And a special type of project is an event. Like it's a unique type. It is still technically a project, but it has its own sort of characteristics, and you've been an event planner and manager, I think, in many different contexts, which is why I'm anxious to talk to you about it. For full transparency and disclosure, I have not myself managed an event of any consequence. So while I have lots of project management experience, not so much as an event planner and manager. So this will be I'm more exploring, and it'll be great to see what your thoughts on it. Just one thing as I'm thinking about the differences, like projects in general, your typical sort of stock project has something at the end that sort of lives on, whether it's if you're building a house, there's at the end of the building project, there's a house.
Yeah.
If you have an IT project where you're creating a new system, at the end of it, there's a system that runs and is maintained and so on. With events, I don't think that's the case. Like at the end of the event, it's done. It's over and it disappears. Like if you're organizing a concert, the concert is done. The band goes away. The trucks, move all the equipment away. And the only thing left is a little bit of cleanup by the cleaners, and that's it. The only thing that remains is memories, but I think that creates a unique challenge for event planners, and that's sort of different. So with all that, what do you think? Would you say that's true or
Absolutely. I think even as you were like kind of getting into like projects versus events, like that was my first thought events are very much all this work, this buildup, you have this high of a night kind of thing. And then that's it, for lack of a better word. I will say in some cases, like there's those tangible results from events. So for example, I have a history in fund development. And so there, your result of the event is like those fundraising dollars that you were able to raise, and it goes into programs, but it's still the event itself. Once it's done, and it's super strange to put sometimes months into planning one single event for it literally just to be done by midnight.
Right. Right. And that is a good point. I mean, the definition of a project is that it creates a unique product, service, or result. And you're absolutely right. There is a result, and you mentioned fundraising, which I know you've had some fundraising experience, that you've done that. And that is true. One of the results of fundraising is hopefully funds, which then
you
live
hope.
on, you hope, you hope you have a plus. But those funds then move on and finance things and so on, which is the result of the fundraising. Even you could say, I guess, other events, like for example, I use the example of a concert that also creates funds, for the
Very
band.
true. Yes.
And it creates experience for the attendees and so on. But yeah, that sort of build up to one, like, it doesn't mean everything happens, like all the things created aren't on that one day, because there are promotions and there are communications. There's all kinds of deliverables that are happening, I think, leading up. I don't know if it's 80% or sort of 90%, but there's some gigantic stuff that all happens on that day.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's, I personally love it. It keeps me on my toes and keeps things exciting for me. And it's nice too, because as much as yes, like it's that end event and then you kind of move on, you do also take away everything that you've learned from that event to other events too. So if you're putting on one concert, you can still use everything that you learned from that at least into the next as well, and even into events that aren't concert related as well. So it's for me, I just love the creative aspect of it, and being able to jump into new and different things. But it is very much a buildup. This high of a night, like my favorite thing about events is the event itself and the troubleshooting, the quick thinking that comes with it. Like event day is my jam, put me there and I'm ready for anything. But then also the end of the night is so satisfying to like sit in suddenly this empty, usually messy venue. Everybody's left. You sit down for the first time all night and it's just like, we just did that. And to me, that is one of my favorite feelings.
Right. And that's that's the kind of thing that you probably, when you've done an event, especially a successful one, that's something then that'll almost motivate you for like that craving for that feeling.
Yeah.
To be able to be at that event, like you say, everybody's gone, the lights are kind of turned down, but you can kind of sit down with the other people there and kind of go, wow, we did something great. That must be an awesome feeling.
You definitely chase it. And it's funny too, even when I'm at events as an attendee, like I feel like I can appreciate how much goes on behind the scenes that people don't see. So that's kind of a cool perspective as well to come from sometimes.
Yeah, that's and that's it. That's something I think for, to watch for anyone watching this, to, when you are at your next event, look around and say, those signs that are on the wall that are directing you, they didn't get there by accident. Somebody thought of that.
Very intentional. And it's like in relation to health code and like fire safety and whatever else might be involved, but it's all very intentional the way things are done. And even where a booth is put, it might be so that on your way out you buy those things. It's all strategic.
Right. It's thought through. It's like your and tell me if you do that. It's almost like I would think to be a great event planner, you'd need to play it through in your mind, like ahead of time. You'd have to visualize and almost, kind of, how they, I don't know if when they say great golfers, before they take the shot, they visualize the ball, going and landing on the green and so on. And I wonder if it's the same thing on events, is that you actually play it through in your mind.
100%. The event happens once, let's say if it's a one-time event or however many times in a span, but I easily go through that event and experience that event at least 10 times, but I would say way more than that too, depending on how long you're planning it for. Right. And then too, you're also when you're planning it, you're kind of doing a critical path and working backwards as well and figuring out what you need to do. You're going through those event plans and making those, and then also running through those event plans with who's working your event. So you are going through multiple times. Yes.
Right. Do you do, and this is a specific question, but it just comes to mind when we say working it through, is do you do any kind of dry run? Like, do you do it like, you know how you do a dress rehearsal when you're doing a play, you do dress rehearsals. Is there an equivalent thing for events that you actually, go to there, and walk around the venue and dry run it?
I would say it depends on the size of event. But if you're working, especially with like an external venue and it's a larger scale event, absolutely. You're meeting with the venue themselves and likely other parties as well, including things like bylaw, et cetera, to make sure you're following all regulations that are there and putting out your ideas that you have questions about or ensure. So you're meeting at the venue way before to see if it'll work out. Sometimes you're going to multiple venues trying to find one that will work for what you're looking for. And then two, the physical aspect, again, depending on the size of the event, you're likely doing a walkthrough with your team, your volunteers, at least once before the event. Sometimes it's an hour or two before doors open and you're going through everything, the training. Sometimes you're training and doing the walkthrough a day or two before.
Right. That's awesome. So question, what type of a person would make, like, what are the key attributes you think to be both successful in or want to be an event planner? Because I don't think it's for everyone. Like, I'm not sure this enormous is for every single personality. So what do you would say the personality traits or the needed to excel?
I would say the number one thing is adaptability. You will have this event plan done down to a T. You have thought of every single scenario that could go on and what your response is to it. But I guarantee you something will go wrong and you have to be able to A, be okay with that and not panic under the pressure, and B, just accept it and figure out a solution. You have to be quick thinking. You have to be adaptable, because I promise you something will go not according to plan. And also I would say you have to, I don't want to say confidence. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but you have to be willing and able to speak up, because if it comes to safety, you need to be able to tell people like, you can't do that. If something isn't going according to the plan that you set out, again, everything is strategic. So you have to be able to, I think as well, communicate that efficiently and not be afraid to speak up in those circumstances either.
Right. When you said about, kind of the things you got to be adaptable, I think you said, and things are going to go wrong. That reminded me of something at an event from one of my classes from years ago. So just a little background, some of my classes, I have the students perform live events. Even though I'm not teaching event planning, it's an excellent way to demonstrate project management tools. And events are something that, people are familiar with the concept of an event. So it's a great way to have a live, project that is an event. It was a fundraiser event and so on. And so one of the things that I talk about in class is the very thing you're talking about. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah.
You should have a plan, think of contingencies, think about how you can mitigate risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But some things are going to happen that you just don't anticipate. Like you've got to be flexible, which is what you're saying. And I still remember this one event. It was an awesome event the student team put on. It was a fashion show. Like, it was a big deal that what they were doing. I remember talking to them and saying, like, are you sure you're going to take this on? Like, there's a lot of work.
That's a lot of coordinating different people too. So good for them.
Good for them. This was a number of years ago, and they had many models and they had a stage and they had a music, and the moving parts were incredible. For, remember, it's just one course of 6 that they're taking. And so it's a gigantic amount of work. but I still remember there was like the lead person on the group, like she was the lead. And I still remember, and I try to go to the events and just be there to support the student team. So I was there just sort of watching and trying to stay out of the way. And I remember that something fell off the table or something. There was some spill and there was Coca-Cola or something on the floor. And I remember she kind of, was fixing it, and she looked and our eyes sort of met, and and she had this look of, oh yeah, okay, I know. Yes, you what you said was true. Like, I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
that this was like the perfect example of, regardless, they were fantastically planned.
Yeah.
But somebody knocked something off the table, and then that was crash on the floor, and she had to react to it right away. No rehearsal, like, you just have to move. You have to go quick and just fix it right away. So
yeah.
That adaptability, you can't go running away going, I can't deal with this. Right?
No. And like, choose your battles to some extent too. Like, sometimes you just, if a sign falls down and it's not affecting, again, like safety or a speaker's up there, then like, let the speaker finish and then go up, kind of thing. Like, be strategic about how you're solving the problem as well. And it's also, as much as I say, like, be open to adapting and all that stuff, it's also okay to ask for help. Like, you have a team for a reason, typically anyways. Like, you're not often running a full event yourself. If you don't have an answer, like, talk to your team and figure it out as a team as well. As much as I emphasize that something will always go wrong, like, I don't want that to scare people either, because that is one of my favorite parts about it, is the troubleshooting and just like, all right, let's do this. It reminds me of what I'm capable of too, in that when we are in situations where we just have to figure it out, we often do.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And I've often, like, described it, and this is true of both projects and events. There's almost like you need two sides to yourself. You need a sort of a split personality on this, which is, one is the thoughtful, reflective planner who's like you said, like, stepping through the steps and is thinking about everything and has got this master plan in place. So very reflective, very analytical. And then on the other hand, you have the the firefighter who is going to put out any fire, appropriately, to the situation, will roll up their sleeves and just like, okay, another problem, got it, another problem. And having that contained in a single person is what makes, like, awesome project managers and event managers.
Absolutely. And it's not like I think it does take a certain person, but you also get better and more comfortable with it the more you do it too. So, like, if anybody's thinking of doing event planning, don't let your first event and like the failures that happen in it steer you elsewhere, because you will get better at it. I have.
Exactly. That's true of everything. That's true of projects I've done in the past. Even my, from a teaching point of view, some of my early classes were awful. Like, I think back to them and go, ooh, that wasn't very good. But then you learn from it and you go, well, I won't do that again. Or I'll change it a little bit and see what happens. And that's the same. But yeah, don't be put off by a few missteps.
No, and this year is a prime example too. With everything COVID related, we aren't doing in-person events. With the event industry I'm in, I'm very, honestly, to be fully transparent, very lucky to have a job right now as well, just because with everything, a lot of the event industry got laid off. Like, there just wasn't things happening. So I'm very grateful, but it's also been very challenging in the sense of, we're now doing virtual events. I am not a computer person. We had to figure out how to do a lot of new things. But I think part of the beauty that came with it too, and even in a live setting, is sometimes it's okay too to just put your event on hold for a super quick second and say, hey, we're just having tech difficulties. We'll be with you in 2 seconds. some people might disagree with that and say like, no, you want that kind of Wizard of Oz curtain. No one should know what's going on behind the scenes. I personally disagree. I feel like people know that things are bound to happen. As long as they know you're working on them, it's all about that communication as well. Instead of leaving them hanging, it's just, we'll be with you guys very shortly. This is what's going on. And this year has been a big example of that with virtual events.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a testament to the flexibility of needed and adaptability. I've been blown away by some of the, and you mentioned creativity as being a key, thing that is important in events is being creative and kind of thinking about, okay, now we have this new medium we're in, this sort of two-dimensional screen that we all have to sort of have an event in. How do you do that? And some of the things that the challenge is to figure it out. It's a puzzle and it's a really hard one.
Yeah.
But it is solvable. There are things you can do that are actually pretty cool.
Yeah. You have to find ways. Ultimately, I think the creativity comes in because you want your event to be engaging. If you put on an event that isn't engaging, what's the point in a sense? Like there's a reason you're putting on an event. There's often a goal of some sort. So you want your guests to be pulled in. Virtually, it has been interesting trying to figure out what that is. And we do so many different styles of events virtually that it's kind of been different for all of them. But we've definitely had to get creative, and sometimes it's about the content that you're putting out and making sure that is engaging and that it's information that people actually want to hear and spend their time learning about or listening to. So as much as it is about what happens during the event, it's also about thinking before you even start planning the event, all the pieces that you want within it as well.
Right. And I take your point too about the technical difficulties. It has stretched us all.
Yeah.
I don't want to jinx what is happening right now, but at any moment, you and I could freeze on the screen.
Yes.
Because one of our Wi-Fi's goes wonky, and we have to adapt. We have to kind of go, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just stop here and then try to reconnect and then try to continue. I had one of my podcast that I did with one fellow where it died after about 25 minutes. It just died. We couldn't connect back, and so it just ended. I just put a little recording at the end and said, well, at this point the Wi-Fi dropped, goodbye.
Yeah.
But you adapt, you figure, and I think if you can do that, especially in this trying time, people are understanding. Like, if you show that you're doing, that you're trying your best and that things are well organized, but if unavoidable things happen, and if you react well to it and
yeah. And again, I think communicate that.
Yes.
And people are much more understanding. Something too that I think is always nice when and where you can, especially if something goes like wrong that it affects the guest experience, let's say, is when and where you can do something to show your appreciation for them as well. So an example I can think of is recently I was doing a virtual event. We streamed to an online platform. I'll try to explain this in as simple as I can. Basically, we record and host our events on Zoom, but how our guests attend them is from the Zoom call, we bring it through a system called OBS, and then that streams to an online platform. We use Twitch, which is basically like a live YouTube kind of website. A lot of gamers use it. Great. So that's how we do it. The speaker who we had, their Wi-Fi connection just was not connecting, wasn't doing great at all. So we had to make that. We were probably 5-10 minutes into the event. Our guests thankfully were wonderful, and I just kind of jumped on, like interrupted essentially, but sometimes you do that just to gain back control of the event, and said, hey, like, look, we're having those tech difficulties. Let us figure this out on the back end. We'll be with you guys very shortly. Because I communicated that, our guests were so great that in like the chat function where they were viewing / attending this event, they started being like, while we're waiting, like, where's everyone tuning in from, and creating that event environment and experience themselves, which was wonderful.
Right.
We then came to the conclusion that because of our guest Wi-Fi, going from the Zoom through to the other program, through to Twitch, was just using too much of their Wi-Fi. And we thought, okay, how can we simplify this? So we put a Zoom link in the chat and we said, everybody come join us. Like, and then they were in that Zoom call with us. It was a little more intimate, which was nice considering the conversation we were having. And guests were so responsive to that. Right. At the end, I then also I had the opportunity to do like a prize draw as a thank you. Like, I want to thank you guys for sticking with us and coming into the Zoom call after. Like, we really appreciate that too. Events would be nothing without your guests. So when and where you can, appreciate them as well.
Right. No, that's really good advice. So a question I have is just, and you know, this would be from a fairly high level, but let's say tomorrow you were assigned you know, a big event, like a whatever it is, a fundraiser, a concert, you know, some sort of gathering, you know, celebration or something like that. What are the things that you start to do? Like, if you were getting your to-do list out, what would be the things you'd start to write on your to-do list as an event planner?
For me, I think it's first making sure you're understanding the task at hand, the objectives of the event, etc. Right now, it would be looking into all the COVID protocols, etc., like what you can and cannot do. Even outside of COVID, it would be looking into those bylaws, depending on where you're hosting the event, the safety things as well. And then you're looking at who do you need to contact? Who are you working with inside your organization, outside of your organization? It's making all those calls, often getting quotes. You should, I would say, almost always be getting quotes. Within that, you'll start to kind of build those partnerships, and you have people that you can go to more or less on the regular, but you should be making sure that you're doing your due diligence in finding the best cost for your company as well, usually. And then it's, I guess, would be, once you worked out with your vendors, what the plans, like what the plans are, who you're working with, it's going through the timeline of the day. And then you're going through that multiple times. All of that I would typically put into like a critical path as well. So working backwards, just to figure out what needs to be done when.
Right. Do you use, as I always ask this, just sort of an informal survey, when you're creating that schedule, that critical path and so on, do you use any specific software or tool, or do you use like a whiteboard or Excel or something like that? Like what sort of platform do you use?
I do typically like to physically kind of write it, whether it's a whiteboard, whatever, first, just as a run through. But as I start to finalize it and actually put it into a working document that I'm then kind of sharing with my team, I'm an Excel junkie. So that's kind of my go-to, but there are a ton of different ways to do it. And I think ultimately it's finding what works for not only you, but your team and the people who will be reading that plan as well. Because the biggest thing with events as well is you need to know that anyone who is involved or not involved, they could take your plan. If you were sick on event day and you could not show up, they should be able to take your event plan and be able to run that event.
Right. So
making sure that whatever system you're using works for your team as well and is clear.
Yeah, I've often said that the sign of the sign of a really, really good manager is that you could not be there and the team will still be able to go on.
Yeah.
You know, at least for a period of time. You know, that's not to say you're not that you're not doing anything, but that you've got the right people in place, communication, everybody knows what their role is, the schedule's there and so on, and that, you know, it's not all dependent upon you just being there every second of the day. So that's,
and in trusting that like they'll figure it out either way, like have those conversations, but also you have to be okay that it might not be how you would have solved it necessarily, but it got done. And that's what's important. I was out for actually 2 large events that I really wanted to be a part of, like selfishly, in the sense that I was like, I want to see this speaker too. I hurt my back and I could not like walk basically. And it was terrible, but it was so nice to know that I could relax and focus on getting better, and my team had it. And that was because you meet regularly, you're constantly communicating, you're making sure that it's things even as little as but they're pretty big, of your administration and organization. If they need to reference a contract and know what's in a rider, they know where to find that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say, I know what you're saying when you say when it's little, but then it's important. It is, the little things are important. Like it's like there's nothing bigger than those little things. I think once you realize that and recognize that, and it's not, you know, there's also the big concept, the big idea, and so you need that. You know, you need the overarching sort of strategy, but after that, it becomes those little things. Like if you need the contract because there's some issue going on event day, well, I don't know
the little things are your foundation.
Yeah.
And without that, you got a cool idea, but how are you executing that idea?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I think that's a really key, at least my vision of a manager, like, you know, project, event, or just manager, you know, leader, is that you can operate at, you know, 50,000 feet. You can be up there in the clouds looking at the big picture, but then you can, like a microscope, almost go down to ground level. Like you can, when needed, go down to micro level. And it's being able to live in those two worlds, which is difficult. Like it's challenging, but if you can do it, it's pretty powerful.
It's actually probably my favorite part. I'm in a position currently where I'm in a supervisor role more, and like managing the team who essentially plans and executes the actual events. And my job is kind of more the administration side, making sure we're meeting our needs and that events are being planned, etc. But when I get to be down on the playing field with them again too, like I love that. And that includes things like the dirty work as well. Like you are scrubbing and cleaning as well.
Right. Helping out. And I want to be clear on what I said. I know is that when I say when I say that you should go down to that micro level, I don't mean micromanaging your team.
Yes.
Like I do not mean that. That's where you give team accountability. You empower them to make decisions and all those good things. But it's when you're needed, when they need you, you can go down with them. Like you said, you can go down and talk to them and problem solve and help move tables around, or, you know, scrub something. And your team will really appreciate that if you do that. But if you kind of are in the front office saying, no, I'm not, I don't get my hands dirty, you go and just execute, that isn't, I don't think that's as effective.
I agree.
What's, have you ever, I mean, I think I can imagine, and actually this is something that I think about whenever I mention the student teams that do fundraisers and so on in some of my classes. The biggest fear is often no one's going to show up. Like, or, you know, you're going to have a 10,000 seat stadium and you get 500 people and it looks silly. Like, how do you manage that? Like that must be, that could become an overwhelming fear.
I think.
How do you address that in events?
Your first call to action in regards to that, I think, is at the very beginning too. Again, making sure you're putting on an event that is being asked for, that is wanted, that people will be intrigued by. So it's definitely like the research aspect before. You're also working with your communications team and making sure that it's being promoted well, but also in the right places. So I think sometimes when you see an event that your ticket sales just aren't going, you have to kind of ask yourself, okay, well, why is it? Do we need to simplify the ask and like letting people know the details? Sometimes too much content, we're in a quick paced world. People scan. So it's about making sure that they're getting the information they need to know what you're asking them to do.
Insidious part about this is what I perceive. I know my own habits are when somebody's there's an event, it's coming up, it's, I know it's not gonna get sold out. It's not like, and so you of course procrastinate. Oh, I'll get it next week. I'll get it next week. And if everybody does that, ticket sales will naturally start really low and then go up exponentially at the closer you get to the event, hopefully.
Yes.
But when you're on the low end of the, sorry, go ahead.
That's where I was going to go, actually, is kind of in the same kind of realm. Is we live in a world of FOMO and fear of missing out, that like people don't commit necessarily until they know that they unfortunately don't have anything better to do. And so it can be scary and tight. I think in some cases you need to know when to kind of pull the event. Like if you have that capability to do so, sometimes it is worth it, or pushing it, etc. But you also sometimes have to have the trust and just, again, kind of problem solving to see if you can advertise it to different markets that might be quicker to jump on.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that's where experience would come. You, like you said, you learn something from everyone. If you start to or kind of go with, well, okay, the data last time was that we had 10% of our tickets came 4 weeks before.
Exactly.
20% came 1 week before, and 80% were in the last week. Then you can sort of say, okay, if we've had 10% 4 weeks before, we're on track. Like, but if we're only at 2%, that's where you could look at early indicators are saying, where the early metrics are not showing, that we're not getting those early birds that are there. And if there's no early birds, there might not be any late birds that'll show up. So that's
often too, early bird ticket sales are kind of nice if they're like discounted or have a perk to it. Like there's definitely some things you can do to help move those ticket sales a little quicker and get them confirmed as well, which is can be also a little creative project in itself.
Yes, yeah, it's it's sort of a good tactic that can be done. So so overall, I mean, I think there's been a great talk, Hayley. I've been really enjoyed talking about. I think event, I've always thought this, but even more after talking to you, that event managers are made of a stronger stuff. Like I think you guys have stomachs of like strong stomachs to be able to manage your way through this, because it is one, like, I mean, most events are a short period of time. I know there are longer ones that go over, but I think the norm is kind of within a day, I think, and that takes a lot of intestinal fortitude, I think. And so it's a very, I think it's a very sort of challenging profession to do, but rewarding, like you were saying before.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. It is can be very you're working often like crazy hours on event day as well, and at the end of the day it can be very tiring too. And because you're working with things that pop up out of nowhere, like it is, but what makes it worth it is the end result and the reward, and that kicking off your shoes at the end of the night and being like, we just did this.
Yeah, no, great. So anyways, well, thanks a lot for chatting today, and good luck in the future, and good luck with your podcast, the Reveler.
Thank you. This was wonderful. And by all means, anyone, feel free to reach out if there's any ever event questions. I love meeting new people, so I'm always an open book.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again.